Hello, Nathan. Hello, Jonathan. And hello, Etienne. Thank you all for joining. We're here today to talk about Honest Grape's extremely exciting kosher syndicates of fine wine for the 2020 vintage. We have two of our absolute favorite winemakers heralded across the world for the quality and variety of their wonderful wines. Firstly, Jonathan Maltus, dear friend for many years, famous exponent and leader of the garagiste movement in the 90s in Saint-Emilion on the right bank of Bordeaux, the first and only Brit to get 100 points from the Wine Advocate for a Wine, not once, but now twice, in fact, and the only winemaker to get an OBE for winemaking as well, which is terribly exciting. Jonathan has been making wonderful wines for many years. He's famous for Le Dome, and we're incredibly excited to be making the first ever kosher vintage of Le Dome. He's also been responsible for our first kosher project, Ponte Labri, which is going great guns and getting high scores into the high 90s, which is tremendous. And we also have his wonderful Chateau Tessier as well. So Jonathan's going to be talking to us a bit more about the specific cuvées he's making, but we're delighted to have him on board again for another round of amazing kosher wines. Equally excited to have our dear friend Etienne de Montille joining us on our kosher journey for the first time. When we wanted to start making the best kosher Burgundies, there was really only one choice for us, and that was Etienne and his winemaker, Brian. Domaine de Montille has a wonderful history and a glorious future. And when we wanted to make both red and white Burgundies, we really had to look to Domaine de Montille because there's no other Burgundy domain which has quite such a glorious reputation for the quality of both its whites and its reds. So we are delighted to have Etienne joining us today to tell us about the very, very special cuvées that are going to be part of our portfolio this year. Thank you, Etienne. And now over to Nathan, who is going to explain more about the project itself and, of course, the whole premise of kosher wine.
So, yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nathan Hill, co-founder of Honest Grapes with Tom. First of all, what's kosher wine? There's nothing intrinsically not kosher about grapes, but wine in Christianity and in Judaism is a sacramental product. And so from the time the grapes hit the sorting table, through the fermentation, the maturation, bottling, and even the labeling, the wine can only be touched by an Orthodox observant Jew. So the way we set this up, it's our fourth year of kosher production with Tessier and Jonathan Maltus, and going to be our first year, this harvest 2020, with Etienne at Domaine de Montille. So how we set this up is that we have myself acting as project manager for Honest Grapes. I am of Jewish origin, although not Orthodox myself. We have Rabbi Akiva Padua of the KLBD, Kosher London Best Inn, who is the supervisory authority, probably the foremost expert in kosher wine and whiskey production in the world. And not only do we have the Hechsher, the stamp of authority of KLBD, but also in previous vintages, his personal Hechsher. It's really seen by him as a prestigious project. We also have local teams in Bordeaux and Burgundy of supervisors who follow the processes under the authority of Rabbi Padua. But really important to Honest Grapes is the idea that the wine is wine-led. And so the friendship and working practice between the head winemaker at Chateau Tessier and our teams there, and between the teams at Domaine de Montille and the head winemaker there, is paramount to us. So I'm very much involved in the development of winemaking processes that follow a very simple maxim, which actually Tom made up, which is great wines that happen to be kosher, rather than any wine as such. And we really are looking for a very limited range of very high quality wines. In Chateau Tessier, we're offering 3 cuvées this year for the first time. Chateau Ponte Labri for the 4th year, Chateau Tessier for the 2nd year, and the the top wine of the estate, Chateau La Dôme, for the first year, 2020. In Domaine de Montille, Etienne will soon be talking about wonderful Premier Cru Volnay-Brouillard, Pouligny Montrachet Chaloumeux, and a Pommard Premier Cru, Le Grand Épineux. And so I'll hand over shortly to Etienne and then Jonathan to talk about their cuvées. In terms of how the syndicate works, basically, I'll explain the detail towards the end of this seminar, but essentially, our members join us by buying club shares of a dozen bottles or more in each of the wines in the syndicate. And that's how it works. We already have commitments to well over 70, I think almost 80% of the wines are present. So this is very much about explaining how the syndicate works and how you get involved. So it's great kosher wine. It's great wine that happens to be kosher. I'd like, under that auspices, to hand over immediately to Etienne to tell us about the wonderful 3 cuvées that Domaine de Montille will be producing for us in vintage 2020. Over to you, Etienne.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nathan. And thank you again for having thought of me for this very exciting project. You know, I've been asked in the past to do some kosher wine, and I thought I was not really ready for that. Also, to be honest with you, you know, the quality of the kosher wine 10 or 15 or 20 years ago was probably not the quality that we can see now. And there is a very interesting trend that you are really participating where, as you say, it's great wine to be kosher and not just kosher wine just being kosher. And I thought it could be very interesting for you, for us, very challenging also. And this is why we together with Brian Civy and Jacques Montagnon, the winemaking team, we are engaging in this project with a lot of excitement. From my hand, there is something even more. There is another reason, which is the proximity and the connection with the Jewish community and culture, and I'm very happy to satisfy the first of wine lover, Jewish wine lover, with great wine. So when we discussed this project, we didn't pick, you know, cuvées that will not sell well, or that would be, you know, the less known, or some village or Burgundy or regular Burgundy. We wanted to go right on with some very good, if it's not famous, Premier Cru in each of the village, very typical from their the place, very typical from their appellation. You know, we wanted to pick a Volnay that is really a Volnay, a Pommard that is really a Pommard, and a Pouligny that will be really a Pouligny, so that through the wine lover will enjoy the terroir and will enjoy a certain transparency, and of course the exact same quality as for all the other domains wines. And the Volnay-Brouillard is more fruit-driven than structure-driven. It is really a typical Volnay with a lot of delicacy, with a lot of elegance, a mix of red fruit and spices, because we will leave some wall cluster. It has a soft texture and a beautiful saline finish. The Pommard Epno is one of the, you know, 2 best vineyards of Pommard. It has been Pommard Epno, Pommard Grands Epno has been picked for an application to be upgraded to the Grand Cru status. Just to say that how respected and how sought after is this vineyard in Pommard. It is also a typical Pommard, you know, with more power, more masculinity, more earthiness in the wine, and also developing a great deal of complexity and length in the mouth. Probably, for a later consumption than the Brouillard. Brouillard will be more easygoing than the Grand Zepno. But it is really one of the top cru in Pommard. And we're very happy that to have picked that one for the project. Puligny Premier Cru Les Chalumeaux, that lies fairly high in the coteau. Always that kind of mineral-driven, slightly reduced, very crunchy fruit and citrus, hint of citrus. And in the mouth, it has a great sense of freshness and salinity. It's a mouth-watering wine, and it goes wonderfully on everything that's come from the sea. And again, this is a true Puligny in the sense that it has that mineral and saline quality that we usually recognize in Puligny Montrachet wines. So 3 great terroirs that we will do with the supervision team. We will just make sure that those wines fetch the quality and the style and the cachet of Domaine de Montille.
My mouth's watering already, Etienne.
Thank you very much.
They do sound remarkably exciting cuvées, Etienne, and I think having them in our portfolio is going to be absolutely tremendous. As a huge fan of the Grand Epinot in particular, I think trying that will be very, very exciting. And it's appropriate now as we hand over to Jonathan, who I mentioned was a founder of the Garagiste movement, but in more recent years has become famous for his Burgundian approach to winemaking in Saint-Emilion, where rather than combining the small plots that he has into single cuvées, he's actually doing very site-specific, terroir-driven Bordeaux, which is very unusual and very, very exciting to us. So, Jonathan, perhaps you could now tell us more about the wonderful wines that you are making for Honest Grapes Kosher Syndicate this year. Thank you.
I got here in 94, and I was lucky enough to meet Jacques Tiempon of Le Pin very early on, because he didn't have a pool in those days and used to come down here and use our swimming pool while he was chatting up his now wife, Fiona, who is a good friend of ours, and I'd worked a couple of years in Cahors, which is sort of 2 hours down the road, quickly realized that Formula One was up the road here in Saint-Emilion, and I couldn't afford the left bank where the property is very large, but the average size of the property here was 3 hectares. And when I got here, I fully embraced the garage movement, which was a movement started by really by inspired by Robert Parker, who said that basically, I don't care whether your dad's a count or whether the property's been in your hands for 500 years. If it's great, I'll rate it. And as a result of that, by 2000, Le Dôme, which we bought in 96, was the same price as Le Tour. Le Tour, unfortunately, has gone a little bit further north since then, but it shows you the power of coming from nothing. And there were basically 3 wines that came out of the garage movement. We've moved on from the garage. The garage movement was a fashion, and like all fashions, it goes out of fashion. But there were 3 main wines that came out of that: Le Mondot, Chateau Valandreau, and Le Dôme. And Le Dôme is slightly different from most wines in Saint-Emilion in that it's 80% Cabernet Franc and 20% Merlot. But I really got into the idea of, because of Jack, the idea of having a single vineyard, which was not really, it's not a really norm for Bordeaux. Bordeaux basically talks about terroir, but it really specializes in blending. It took me about 10 years to learn how to blend, and I was lucky enough to have Gilles Pouquet, who was the consultant oenologue for Cheval Blanc, Canon, and a few other serious chateaus. And he really taught me how to put together a wine that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what you want in a wine. You don't want a wine that goes off into nowhere. So that was really the beginning of the single vineyard idea. And then in 2001, I thought it would be great fun to, sorry about the construction noises going on. But I thought it'd be great if we could expand that idea, and almost in a sort of Burgundian way, which is why it was great talking to Etienne. It's not a normal thing for Saint-Emilion for a producer to do a number of single vineyards, but we were lucky enough during the 1990s, early 2000s to buy 10 hectares up on the Côte, which is the grandest part of Saint-Emilion. We have further 50 hectares down on the plain here where we make Chateau Tessier, which is this wine, which is our, introduction wine, if you like. And it's the biggest mark in Saint-Emilion. So,
fantastic. Before you show us the three wines, can you tell us something about the most recent developments, the new winery? I can hear renovation going on behind you with your new accommodation at the estate.
Well, we're doing an awful lot of stuff. I've just signed off on the accommodation. It's not fully finished, but and over there, the noise you can hear in the background is a very, very large storage area, which is two huge cathedrals for wine, and we're going to store in there our wine and also some cru classes, because we're now selling cru classes as well. So there'll be about 20 million euros worth of wine in there, which is why security needs to come in.
You need space for them, and you've got 11 apartments, haven't you? Because I stayed at one when I was with you last.
We do now.
And it was just being finished off.
Yeah. Well, in certain cases, apartments would be a strong word, but they're but they're nice, and we're about to do the landscaping here, and so there'll be lots of nice flowers. But there'll always still be a place where a helicopter can land, because this is important in Bordeaux.
And then tell us about the new winery, where it is, who it's been designed by, and what it means for your cru wines.
Well, we want to apply to become a Premier Grand Cru Classé B in 2022. And the reason we can't do it is because we make 60 hectares of wine. The wine that you apply for, which in this case would be Le Dôme, has to represent 50% more of your production, which it doesn't, because it's a smaller production. So we're really lucky enough to get Lord Foster, who has designed our new winery, which is causing an awful lot of uproar. And I've just come from a meeting with all the crew, and I'm supposed to be up there, but because you said you want to speak to me, I've got to go back there afterwards. But
Honest Grapes takes precedence, Jonathan, as usual.
Correct. But it's the most beautiful winery, and if you're into wine pornography, it has Angelus on the left, it has Quintus on the right, it has Beausejour Becco, Beausejour de Folagaros, and Canon to the right, and the parcel is surrounded on three sides by Canon and one by Angelus, and it's the most beautiful building. It's the only other winery that Norman has done in Bordeaux. The other one he did was Chateau Margaux, which is not such a shabby name. So we're pleased to be a follow-up to that.
That's fantastic, Jonathan. So can you start off by introducing us to the Chateau Tessier that we're going to be making kosher for the second vintage?
Yeah. So this is Chateau Tessier, And this is basically our entry-level wine. And when I say entry-level, unfortunately, it's maybe not entry-level at £5 or £6. It's a little more expensive than that, but it is Saint-Emilion. And, you know, we were lucky enough for this wine I'm tasting here, 2019, to get 92, 94 points for a wine that I don't know, you would know better what the retail price is, but this is, you know, this is a score that would normally go to Cru Classes. But we make 40,000 cases of this wine. So for 92, 94, everybody talks about bang for the buck on this wine. It's what we used to call in the olden days a Sunday claret. But because we make a ton of it, we need everybody to drink it every Sunday.
I think you're doing yourself down, Jonathan. I think Tessier is far more than a Sunday claret. Okay. It's a beautiful wine. So the unsupervised, non-kosher version is sold in the sort of mid-20s of pounds. It's beautiful, expressive, plush wine.
Which, you know, if it's getting 92, 94 from Suckling, from James Suckling, that's, you know, that's a good score for a wine at that price.
That's cool, and it's going to be our second year of production of the kosher Tessier. We have a little bit of...
We also do it in double magnums, which is, and luckily enough, we still have a production of the small dumpy double magnums, and they're, you know, it's fantastic if you're going with friends shooting, or you got a nice family gathering, to shove a big bottle on of a wine that's actually not so expensive, but looks... It's got Saint-Emilion Grand Cru all over it. It's quite fun.
Yeah, and as a syndicate member for our kosher syndicate, we can bottle them in any format you like.
You can, yeah.
So show us Ponte Labri now.
Okay, so Ponte Labri is something that we do only together. So this is an exclusive Honest Grapes. And it's a parcel literally right next door to the center of Saint-Emilion. So this is on what we call the plateau. It's next door to the gendarmerie, so it's well secured up there. And there is a chateau called Chateau Grand Ponte, and the only parcel they don't own within the parcel called Grand Ponte is this particular parcel. So Grand Ponte is a Cru Classe, and you know, we were lucky enough to get this. We cropped this at 4 bunches to the vine, and therefore, it's quite a, you know, it's quite a big wine, and you know, 80% Merlot, 20% Cabernet Franc for those who are into the mix, and really good.
What's really beautiful about Ponte Labri is its vintage variation is so Burgundian. It shows that perspective of the vineyard, and that old vine Cabernet Franc you've got there really, really adds to that beautiful, beautiful Merlot. And I think all of the vines on that field are quite old, aren't they?
They are, yeah. Some of them go... We had a big frost in '56, and luckily, so 90% of the vineyards in Saint-Emilion were completely eradicated. It was -30, so it wasn't just the crop, it was actually the vines themselves, which had to be replanted. But some, you know, parcels came out of it, and the Cabernet Franc on this was planted in 1947. So what you're getting is a lot of great old vines at the stage you need it, which is at the end of the wine. Cabernet Franc gives a full stop. It's the daddy of Cabernet Sauvignon and Sauvignon Blanc. So it has tannins in the way of Cabernet Sauvignon, but they're slightly softer, so they're what we call cashmere tannins.
Wonderful. So now if you can go on, Jonathan, to introduce Le Dôme, that we'll be making kosher this year for the first time.
Yeah. We'll both be making kosher for the first time this year.
Well, you'll be making them, I'll be drinking.
So Le Dôme is our top wine. We got 100 points from Robert Parker in 2010. For the 2016, we got a further 200 points, but that's not 200 points, that's 2 loads of people giving us 200 points. We've got a lot of 99s. It really is a wine that luckily is supported by a lot of journalists, and it's reassuringly expensive. But it comes from next door to Angelus and Chateau Canon. So it's the only, at the moment, Grand Cru in an area of premier Grand Cru classes. So surrounded completely. And Michael Broadbent years ago said, if the previous owners had ever decided to buy some barrels, there's no reason that it shouldn't be a Grand Cru. And, Premier Grand Cru Classic. So that's what we're going for in 2 years' time with the new winery, and the winery is out of this world. If anybody's coming to Saint-Emilion, you've got to go and have a look at it. Even in construction, it's fun.
And I think Le Dôme is probably the biggest expression of Cabernet Franc in Saint-Emilion.
Yes, it is. So basically, it's 80% Cabernet Franc, which is the complete reversal of most wines in Saint-Emilion. The nearest to it would be Cheval Blanc at 65%. But more and more people are planting, because of global warming, are planting Cabernet Franc and ripping out Merlot, just basically because Merlot is becoming a little flabbier, and therefore Cabernet Franc is an intrinsical aspect to the wine. So even when we talk about Tessier, we're looking at a wine that's got 30% Cabernet Franc, which is kind of like the biggest on the plane. So we are, very much Cabernet Franc driven as a chateau.
So there you are. If you want to Google wine porn in Saint-Emilion, or the daddy of Cabernet Franc, it's going to be Jonathan. And this lovely lineup with Chateau Tessier.
I don't like the daddy bit.
This lovely lineup with Chateau Tessier, which I'd hardly describe as the entry-level wine. I think, to be honest, for most people it's their marker, it's their crew. And these two wonderful single vineyard wines of Pontet-Labrie, with Merlot Cabernet Franc, and its mirror image being 80%, 20% Cabernet Franc Merlot of Le Dôme, make up our kosher lineup for 2020. Jonathan, to conclude, do you want to tell us about the approach to the kosher winemaking and the differences you see between the kosher wines and the regular wines you make?
Well, we don't. Essentially, what we're trying to do with both wines should be identical, other than the fact that one is kosher and one is not. Obviously, in the making of kosher wines, everything we direct has to be done by somebody from the faith. But if they screw it up, we shout at them. So you can be assured that if you're buying the kosher wine, you're getting the same standard as the wine that you're getting if it was non-kosher.
Thank you. And the fact that you're putting up with doing that for a fourth year for us is fantastic. And
yeah, Neil is going berserk.
Neil's got to, exactly. So as we said at the beginning of this event, the really important thing for Tom and myself is that we're getting great wines that are made by Jonathan in Bordeaux, made by Etienne in Burgundy, that just happen to be kosher and approved at the highest standard by KLBD in London. So to finish off, I just want to remind everybody what you need to do to join our syndicate. It's really very simple. It's just like a crowdfunding activity. We're committing to Jonathan and to Etienne to purchase from them a certain number of barrels of these 6 cuvées, the 3 that you see in front of you now from Bordeaux, and the Volnay Pouligny Marvacher and Pommard Premier Cru, all from Etienne in Burgundy. You just commit to us in dozen bottle lots. You put your money where your mouth is, and we look after the wines. I'm acting as project manager. Rabbi Padua from KLBD in London is directing and providing the Hechsher, the kosher authority for the wines, and our local teams in Burgundy and Bordeaux are working directly with the winemakers, Neil and Jonathan in Bordeaux, and Brian, Jacques and Etienne in Burgundy, to make sure we get wonderful wines to you. Thank you very much for joining in this lovely little seminar. I hope you've enjoyed getting an insight onto Honest Grapes Kosher Syndicates 2020, and look forward to receiving your pledges. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to Etienne again. Thank you, Tom, and thank you very much indeed to Jonathan as well.